Now, a lot of people watched Joe Rogan and Nowitzki yesterday and said it sounded like this was just one thing that was paid for the UFC, paid for by the UFC to justify Jon Jones fighting. And first of all, I don't believe Joe Rogan would do that. Joe Rogan is an independent guy. He has an independent platform. He is paid by the UFC to broadcast, but that's only on certain events. He doesn't have equity in the UFC. And for his own admission, he might not even be doing that in a year or two. He's friends with Dana, but Joe is a very independent guy. But I think it came off looking as if, wow, let's justify how Jon Jones can fight. And look, I want to look more into the science, but based on a lot of things that Jeff was saying, it scientifically seemed to make sense. But the truth is that Jeff works for the UFC, which means Jeff is paid by the UFC, and ultimately people will do things where their bread is buttered, including the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So if they had managed to actually get together and vote on this, ultimately, it's in their interest to vote on what's going to help the state of Nevada make more money, period. And the same with the California State Athletic Commission. They're going to vote on an event that will make them more money. So everyone's biased in some way, including USADA. And we've seen these world doping organizations all have points of failure. And we've seen the movie Icarus, and we've talked to people like that. So we know that there's all sorts of weird interests here and there, and people pulling here and pulling there. So you're going to have to go ahead and make your decision. And I'm really curious what people say here in the chat on whether they believe one thing is happening to the other. But I will say this one final thing, is that if Jon Jones was really popped for these picograms and no other large amount of some major steroid that's shown up in his system, I don't know how you can stop him from fighting. And there's definitely something that can happen with these pulsing or wave effects where it metabolizes fat cells and pieces like that in your body where you've stored up some of these steroids in your system from years in the past, and that can be metabolized. From a scientific perspective, that makes sense to me. And again, I don't have a PhD in chemistry, but I do have an engineering degree from MIT. I do know a little bit about science in this standpoint. And from what they're saying, some of this stuff makes sense. Now, on the same point, I've seen a lot of really interesting comments on the Rogan episode and people talking about different takes on this and what's going to happen. I know Brendan Schaub has chimed in with his version that it's a cover-up.